Hello. Today I'm going to be talking about political motivation in modern-day American news. Start off to give you context about my viewing diary entries. Each week I looked at a different news outlet covering a story focusing on America. These were stories from the timeline of the last 5 years or so, with the length of the videos being anywhere between about 2 to 10 minutes roughly. After doing this each week, I made some notes about the patterns I was seeing. Now, it didn't really depend on the length, whether it was a longer or shorter segment. It really varied in how much context I was getting in terms of defining vocabulary, giving me all the facts about a situation to fully comprehend and understand it. The ones that left out certain information or didn't explain themselves well made me question their credibility. And when they're leaving stuff out to intentionally sway my opinion one way rather than giving me room to assess the source and form my own thoughts about it, it made me think about what the purpose of that specific outlet was. This all being said, it kind of made me think about why American news is so politically driven in the modern day. So then it made me think about, well, what did it look like historically? The first example I looked at was pictured here is Edward Murrow with then President JFK. Murrow was a well-known news broadcaster, first starting out in the 40s, and he first started out in radio. He was so popular that he eventually got his own TV show on CBS. Something he did that was kind of seen as abnormal for the time was he actually was against the Red Scare in the 1950s and McCarthyism. He actually had Senator McCarthy come on his show in the 50s, and just using the facts and knowledge from him and his team that they had compiled together, they completely showed how this man was incredible, and what he was doing was just to try and sway America into thinking a certain way because he saw this as a threat. Now, at the time when communism was seen as a bad thing, Murrow's audience commended him for saying what McCarthy was doing was wrong and going against the idea of communism and how he went about it. Another historical example I looked at was the Watergate scandal. This is a screenshot on the right here of Richard Nixon being covered by CBS during the 70s as the event was happening. This segment was about 10 minutes, and it did a good job at giving me just the information, just the facts. What I did find kind of peculiar for the time period, though, was the reporter was straight up calling the hypocrisy and the shadiness of Nixon being involved in this scandal and what it meant as a president doing this. Something both of these historical examples have in common is they were both happening when the Fairness Doctrine was in place, something we've mentioned in our previous classes. Now, the news is without a Fairness Doctrine, and we get stuff like this. This image was taken from one of our slideshows a previous week, talking about the reportings of dead Israelites versus Palestinians. There's a clear favor towards reporting one or the other to cast America in a certain light. So with this being said, it made me think about why America is so politically driven in its news. What might cause that? According to Boston University, our two main political parties, the Democrats and the Republicans, are actually varying in beliefs and very divided as compared to ever before. As one researcher from the university points out, quote, "Powerful alignment of ideology, race, and religion renders America's divisions unusually encompassing and profound," end quote. So what this study was saying is that these two political parties have way more ties and emphasis to what they believe about civil rights, religious practice, and their ideologies, to the point it is putting a huge divide in them than previously. Another thing to consider in the modern day with news is the introduction of social media in the last decade or so. As one of our readings points out, quote, "And you argue that creators who have to build audiences from scratch are doing so with an eye towards these trust-building principles, whereas traditional media takes their trust for granted," end quote. What this reading was saying was how influencers, or creators as we like to call them, because they, if done well, build a personal connection with their audience, it makes us feel like we do have a deeper, trusting connection with them. So when they say stuff, whether it's true or not, they're tended to be believed. Something that current news that's worked for decades now has to think about possibly reformatting and competing with, because it has this professional front that creators do not have. Something else to consider is with social media is, as Pew Research Center reported, a good 54% of US adults are reported to get at least some of their news from social media. Take in consideration that social media spreads information very quickly and effectively, whether this is true or not. Because we're able to do this, and the parties are so divided and polarized, it's very easy for bias to be supported. Another one of our readings says, quote, "When friends, family members, colleagues, and especially strangers disagree with our views, it is easy to attribute this disagreement to the failures of these people. They are ignorant of the facts, too emotional to properly evaluate the situation, or too stupid," end quote. So because we have the media that has a vast array of information, whether it's true or not, and our political parties are also very different in terms of what they view as right or wrong, it's very easy to have a bias and for it not to go unchallenged. So with American news being so murky nowadays, how might we go about finding reliable news? The Literary News Project says to try these 5 steps. The first thing you want to do is do a quick search about the story you're looking at. Is everyone coming to the same consensus about what's happening with that particular story? Number 2 is, what are the standards this news source is upholding? Are they credible and are they factual? Are they giving you all the information about a source without trying to make you sway one way or the other, or as I mentioned before, leaving out facts? Number 3 is transparency. Look into who owns that news source and who's funding them, as that can dictate what they say about a story and how it's crafted, how it appears to the American public. Number 4 is accountability. When a news station makes an error, do they correct it? Do they state it's an error? And number 5 is you want to properly assess your sources. A quick search is a great start, but you want to actually do all these steps, thoroughly analyze why the source is doing what it does, how it's reporting, and all that, to make sure that it's giving you the facts and not trying to make you think one way or another about a given news story. With all that being said, I want to know, what do you think is the cause of modern American news being politically driven? Thank you.